Hi, this segment we're going to talk about cultural deprivation perspective. Cultural deprivation perspective was kind of spearheaded by Franklin Frazier. Franklin Frazier was the first black president of the American Sociological Association. Okay, and basically he talked about if it hadn't been for slavery and oppression, that black people would be just like white folks. Okay. Now, this theory was really significant in fighting the inherent inferiority theoretical perspective. Okay, saying that it's not genes; it's about in terms of society and their occupations and what they access the resources. Okay, Franklin Frazier, he's famous for his book he wrote, Black Bourgeoisie. Where he went to Chicago back in the 1940s and did research on black middle class families. I have to say one thing about Franklin Frazier is there's not too many other researchers out there about middle class blacks. In terms of Franklin Frazier wrote about middle class blacks. In Chicago, there's a very large middle class black population. You have black lawyers, black doctors, black politicians. Even back in the 1930s, 1940s, you had large black middle class to a certain extent. Okay, and that's who Frazier's research focused on. But Frazier's basic assumption is that everything African was lost during the Middle Passage and slavery, and basically more of an American culture to a certain extent. Okay. Next individual I'll talk about dealing with cultural deprivation approach is Kenneth Clark. Kenneth Clark was the psychologist who invented the doll study. The doll study. Okay, and from this, and I'll talk about the doll study later on, but from this, he used the doll studies to win Brown versus Board of Education case. Okay, in other words, that's where they desegregate the school. He said that black children's self-esteem is basically being destroyed by segregation and racial oppression. Therefore, he helped Thurgood Marshall, who was the law attorney at that time, who argued that case to win the Brown versus Board of Education, which basically said the separate but not equal is bogus. Okay, and this would open up the doors for integration of schools. Okay, I said before, this perspective, we're not really inferior because of environment. We're inferior because we're inferior because of environment, not because of the bad genes. I mean, it's seductive because it's used to fight racial discrimination during the civil rights era, but at the same time, you see it as a problem because it still assumes that Africans are less than. Now, there are three divisions or three different scholars who are related to this cultural deprivation. I'm talking about Franklin Frazier, okay? And Franklin Frazier's would be kind of like poverty and acculturation. This poverty and culture is what dysfunctional culture is a result of being in this hostile societies, which caused African Americans. So, in other words, like I said, if it hadn't been for poverty and we had the same economic opportunities, black folks would be just like white folks. Okay. Pathological approach, Daniel Moynihan. Daniel Moynihan was a senator in New York during the 1960s. That's actually who Hillary Clinton replaced as senator in New York at that time. He was a liberal. Okay, his called, and I say his is pathological approach because he felt that it's the environment that's causing black people to be this way. But basically, he went and did research. Moynihan actually went in and did research on black families. Okay, and while he's doing his research, he knows these black boys are washing dishes and cooking and doing these type of things, and he was appalled to see, boys washing dishes and doing quote traditionally and babysitting the kids, and so he felt that black males were growing up in sick families. Black folks were, because they were washing dishes and doing things traditionally female things, that these black boys are going to grow up with sex role identity issues. Okay, and one way to relieve that is we'll send these black males who don't have any male role models to the front lines of Vietnam. Okay, he also talked about how black families are matrifocal. Okay, matrifocal, female headed. Okay, to a certain extent. Okay, and he said this, and that's where I say black families are characterized by a tangle of pathology, and even middle class blacks aren't exempt from that because they still have contact with their lower class family members, because they use extended family, and the ideal family, according to Moynihan, was a nuclear family. Nuclear family, 2.5, mother, father, 2.5 children, extended family, mother, father, aunts, uncles, and so forth. And think about that, okay? Black families are sick white families, and it's all these generations of oppression that's causing them to make adaptations that make families dysfunctional. Well, first of all, 70% of the families that Moynihan went to had fathers there, okay? And so only 30% of the people in his research had no black male role models. And we'll talk about black males. Well, first of all, if you look at African American families, cooking and washing dishes is not a limit to women. Okay, guys, cook too. Okay, whereas at that time down south, I knew white guys growing up, especially people down south, who would starve to death in a house full of food. But think about that. He interpreted black guys doing regular female headed as a dysfunction, okay, as opposed to that's an adaptation to a situation. Okay, I know a lot of white women nowadays who want some guy who okay with a guy washing dishes and cooking for them every now and then. Okay, next individual I'll talk about, but the Moynihan report was really significant to a certain extent. Okay, because like I said, he attacked the black family in different levels. He said, first of all, African Americans, because they use the extended family system as opposed to nuclear family system, they're always going to be dysfunctional. Of course, Margaret Mead, in her later years, said, well, maybe the nuclear family is not ideal. I mean, think about it in terms of the nuclear family. Nuclear family is great when things are going good, you know, in terms of, you know, you can stack them to move out to the suburbs and stack all your money. Because the problem with extended family, somebody always needs something. Uncle so-and-so needs some money here, and Uncle so-and-so, we always help them out, so it's hard to get ahead. Okay, the problem is when things go wrong, that's when the nuclear family system does not work as well. Okay, you can always extend the family. You can stay with your cousins or family members, and whereas now you're out there alone and all those type of issues. So, in other words, the assumption that the nuclear family system is ideal, we know now that may not necessarily be the ideal. Okay, also the whole idea, and this where Fraser was kind of too, the idea of the European or where the European family is the ideal family structure, and everybody else who's not like Europeans, something's wrong with them.